Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you. We're here to talk about macroeconomics. At the end of this talk, my hope is that you'll have a greater love for the economy. My name is Bruce Kerber. I'm the author and originator of the Divine Economy models and the Divine Economy theory. I'm an economist in the classical liberalism tradition. Today, we're going to consider the following statement on a screen share. Production constraints in general are defined by laws, such as property rights, by the order given within the market, by transformation that is molded within the capital structure, and by the human spirit, which is entrepreneurial by nature and expressed as human action. Think about it. What can you make without the means to make it? Absolutely nothing. Imagine, if you will, a world where you want to make a sandwich, but you have no bread, no meat, no veggies, and certainly no condiments. Why? Because you don't own anything. Yep, not even a crumb. It's like trying to create a masterpiece with an empty canvas and no paint. Spoiler alert, it's not happening. Now, let's sprinkle in some chaos for good measure. Picture a world where there's no rhyme or reason to anything, and exchanges are about as likely as pigs flying. The uncertainty is so thick you could cut it with a knife if you had one, but you don't, which you don't have, because remember, you don't own anything. So naturally, no exchanges are happening here. It's like trying to trade air for, well, air, more air. Oh, and let's not forget the element of time. Without a connection to time, there's no foundation. Imagine living in a world where you can't even contemplate change. It's like trying to plan for the future while stuck in a never-ending present. Now, let's strip away the beauty of human creativity and expression. What's left? No sense of alertness, no discovery, no courage to act. It's like being a robot with no programming, just standing there waiting for a command that never comes. Thrilling, right? Of course, all of these scenarios are completely antithetical to the real world and to human reality. In our actual world, we plan for the future, and our creativity and expression drive us forward. And guess what? Because of all of this, there is production. We make things, we innovate, and we thrive. So next time you hear someone questioning the fundamentals of ownership and exchange, just remember, without the means to make it, you're left with absolutely nothing. And who wants that kind of reality? Certainly not us. Let's keep owning, trading, and creating, because that's what makes the world go round. Production constraints in general are defined by laws, such as property rights, by the order given within the market, by transformation that is molded within the capital structure, and by the human spirit, which is entrepreneurial by nature and expressed as human action. So what would happen if one or another of the production constraints was made unbearable? Gather round for a tale as old as time itself. the horror stories of statism and interventionism. You see, history has quite the collection of these little gems, each one a shining example of what happens when property rights are thrown out the window. Let's start with a classic, the Great Leap Forward in China. Who could forget the infamous backyard furnaces? The idea was to boost steel production by having everyone melt down their pots and pans. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Instead of creating a steel empire, they ended up with lumps of useless metal and, oh yes, a famine that starved millions. Turns out, replacing the market with arbitrary bureaucracy wasn't such a hot idea after all. Next up, the Soviet Union. Ah, the land of the 5-year plans, where bureaucrats decided what and how much to produce. The result? Bizarre misallocations of resources, like entire factories churning out left shoes with no right shoes in sight. Who needs a matching pair anyway? Oh, and let's not forget the forced collectivization of farms, which led to widespread famine. Because nothing says progress like starving your population. And who could overlook North Korea? This delightful example of statism shows us what happens when innovative action is viewed with suspicion and covetousness. The country is stuck in a time warp, with its capital suppressed and its people living in relative impoverishment. Meanwhile, South Korea, embracing property rights and the market, zooms ahead with innovations in technology and industry. But hey, who needs smartphones and cars when you got statues and propaganda, right? All these examples share a common thread, the unnatural meddling of the state. The more intense the intervention, the more regressive the consequences. It's like watching a horror movie where the monster is bureaucracy and the victims are the citizens. So next time someone suggests a little more government control might be the answer, just remember these historical horror stories. They show us that the best way to avoid the nightmare is to stick with what's natural: property rights, market forces, and the freedom to innovate. Because when it comes to running an economy, nothing beats the real thing. What can we learn from this life lesson? There are natural limits of the economy, those invisible guidelines that keep everything from spiraling into chaos. It's safe to say we can identify these limits by examining property rights, the market, the capital structure, and the entrepreneurial spirit. You know, the usual suspects that keep the economic engine running smoothly. But wait, what happens when you throw some artificial constraints into the mix? Imagine a free-flowing river that nourishes everything in its path. Now, imagine someone deciding to build a dam right in the middle of it without any regard for the natural flow. Suddenly, the river's ecosystem is disrupted, and instead of a thriving environment, you get stagnant pools and dried up riverbeds. That's what happens when you impose price controls or heavy regulations on the market. You disrupt the natural flow of supply and demand, leading to shortages, surpluses, and a whole lot of economic misery. So what's the takeaway here? When you burden the natural processes of the economy with artificially imposed constraints, you get a hampered, debilitated mess. It's like trying to drive a sports car with the parking brake on. Sure, you might move forward, but it's going to be slow, painful, and probably involve a lot of screeching and smoke. In the end, let's remember to respect those natural limits, Because if we don't, we're not just inviting a little chaos. We're throwing a full-blown economic party, complete with the unwanted guests, inefficiency, corruption, and stagnation. And trust me, nobody wants to clean up after that kind of party. I hope you'll subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'll see you next time.